Whoa! Well, hello again, fifth graders. Once again, I'm reading my USA Studies Weekly. This week, it's looking at the American Indians of, the Eastern Woodland. Interesting. Now, it's looking at the region of the United States east of the Mississippi River. Much of that area was filled with dense, thick forests. Also some open spaces, but if we look here, you can see our regions again. So the Mississippi River runs about right here. Everything on this side is what it's talking about. That's a huge region, all the way from Maine in the north down to Florida in the south. Now, we can imagine there's probably some differences between these tribes in this area, but they share a lot of things in common, which is why it's talking about them all in one big article. Now, we've seen a lot of different climates, a lot of different ecosystems. We've learned about different tribes and how they manage to live in those areas. What makes these ones unique? What about living in dense woodlands makes these Native Americans different from the other Native American tribes? Now, we know, once again, a lot about them based on the stuff that we find that's left behind, the artifacts that archaeologists dig up or were traded down and handed down. We do not know much because they did not have a written language. Just like the other tribes, they did not write down histories, so we can't just read books about them that they wrote themselves. A lot of what we know based on ideas. Hey, we found this thing, let's surmise what it could be from and what it could be for. An example of that, one of the tribes, the Hopewell, they found a lot of material that they were using to make really pretty items. They made different trinkets out of them. They noticed that the items themselves were from really far away places. So they thought, well, wait a second, how did these Native Americans get stuff from way over there if they lived way over here? And they thought, well, the only thing that makes sense is they traded. They had a vibrant trade economy. So they would trade items with other Native Americans that maybe were moving around. And that way they got stuff from different parts of the United States. They got different resources from different areas, and they're able to work with that. So that's one example of how archaeologists will use an item to learn something about a people or a culture group. Because remember, they didn't have the stuff they were working with. So it's how did they get it? They must have traded with somebody else to get that stuff. Another thing that I thought was really interesting was looking at these longhouses. Holy cow. That's a pretty impressive structure right there. They said they could be 50 to 100 feet long. Whoa! And the tribe, the Algonquian, believe I'm saying that correctly. They used to build these in several different families who all live in the same one. Imagine how hard it is just getting along with your siblings right now. What if you had like multiple families you had to deal with? Oh, that could be pretty intense. But I imagine it must have gone over pretty well. They must have been okay with that because why else would they build such a large structure and they all live together in it? So what do you think they had to do? What kind of conflicts do you think came up in those houses? Interesting things to think about. Well, once again, we're thinking about the different region these guys come from, the different resources they have available to them, the way that they interacted and lived in the areas they were from. This group often had lots of wood to work with, lots of animals they could hunt because these dense woods provided all the things that they needed. They also did some farming. They had a bunch of different staple crops that they would grow, and they later even taught some of the colonists how to grow a lot of these. So this is the first Native American group that meets the colonists coming over from Europe, or that they first met, you get it. They met them first. They didn't see the other Native American groups until a few years later. So we have Indians in dense woodland. We have Native Americans in very wet climates with lots of ocean opportunities, hunting whales and building large structures out of wood. We have Native Americans living on very wide open spaces, hunting huge animals and getting much of what they need from those animals. And we have Native Americans living in dry, arid places, very desolate regions where they grew a few crops and had a tough time living. Thinking about all these different groups, what do they share in common? What separates them and makes them unique and different? A lot of them built a structure of some sort to live in. They all did that. That's something they share in common, but they're all very different, unique structures. So think about that today as you're answering the questions and doing the reading. What do they share in common? What sets them apart? And why are they different? All right, you guys, those are my thoughts for this week. And oh, by the way, when I was in 6th grade, I had a mountain bike, and it was blue and red. In fact, I still have the same bike today. All right, that's all. See you next time.